Hello, everybody. Hello, themed attraction showcase students. I hope you guys are all doing well today. Just going to give a minute for everyone to get in here. Thanks so much for joining us. We actually have a good number of students today too. That's great. Sending out a reminder helps. So, all right, I think everyone's in here. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I'm just going to go ahead and start. I'm Chris Rogers. I'm a faculty member at IUPUI in themed entertainment. And I, along with Peter Weishauer and Jamie DeRuiter at Ringling, as well as Nate and Jesse, who have helped put this together. We're really just thankful to you all for participating, but also specifically to the judges for taking the time to review each of your projects. And so, first of all, I want to say before we get to the judges introducing themselves is, as students, this is a unique opportunity that you will not get many places. And so having the opportunity for industry professionals such as Jessica, Ian, and Lewis to take time to review your projects is definitely a benefit. So take advantage of this time. Take to heart the notes that they're going to share with you. So this is going to be a time where each of you is going to get 10 minutes of feedback on your projects. And hopefully we'll have time. I'm going to have a timer on the screen. So I will be tracking that. You'll have time to maybe ask a few questions back. And then we'll move on to the next project from there. And so, but take advantage of this. These judges have a long-standing history in the industry and are definitely gifted and talented individuals. So before we get started, let's do some introductions of our judges. So Jessica, you're first on my screen. Would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Piatti, and I work in the Netherlands as an attraction designer. I've been working in the industry as a graphic designer, and now I'm more specialized in creative development and concept pitches.
And Ian?
Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, as it may be. Ian Mac Vittie. I'm with Technifex XR as Executive Vice President. Background in system integration in the entertainment industry with Disney for over almost a quarter of a century in themed entertainment, animation, show action equipment, control systems, etc. And happy to participate in this call today.
And Lewis?
Hi there, everybody. Thanks for having myself, the other judges, and all you guys' participation. I'm Louis Alfieri. I'm the owner of Raven Sun Creative. We're an experiential design and consulting agency working all over the world. I've been in the industry about 31 years, I think now. I started as a concrete sculptor in the industry, worked my way from the bottom kind of up to what we're doing now. Spent a number of years with Universal Creative as a senior designer there, and then started our company more than 10 years ago and have been working in Asia, the Middle East, and whatnot since. Thanks for allowing us to participate. Take care.
All right. So before we get started, I'm going to give some time for some just general feedback. And this feedback was provided actually to the review panel yesterday, as well as the one that we had last Friday. And so this is for all students that are participating. This is just some general feedback that judges noticed. And then I'm also going to give just a minute or two for our current judges to provide any additional items that they want to. So take these items to heart. So first of all, when creating these projects, you want to make sure that you do your research. And so you want to make sure that your concept is credible, especially if you're working with any established styles, cultures, myths, storylines, time periods, etc. So if something's out of place, the judges will typically notice that. So you want to make sure that you do your research and that you understand that the elements you're putting in there need to actually make sense for the genre or the time that you're going for. Next thing is let us know your strengths. If a reviewer knows you're a business major, illustration student, etc., then those are the skills they're looking for. Those are the ones that we want to actually see shine. And so they're then not as concerned about other gaps if it's not your area of expertise. So if you're a business major, obviously you want to press into that. Talk about ROI, talk about F&D, talk about
on a paid ticket.
Talk about, sorry about that. Talk about R&D, talk about budget. And so there might be less of an expectation on concept design or illustration or something of that nature. So you want to play to your strength and you want to let the judges know what your strengths are. If you use prepared assets or tools that someone else generated or something was done automatically, that's fine. You just want to give credit where credit's due when you do that. If you're aspiring to be a 3D modeler, for example, there would be no reason to use for you to use existing assets because you're hopefully going to model them yourself. And so again, that kind of goes back to playing to your own strengths. Proofread, please. That's another thing. They did notice there was issues where students did not proofread their work. So you want to make sure that you're proofreading. That's really the first line of defense. If you're not proofreading your work and a judge catches that, it's going to look poorly on you. Okay. Be sure to review and follow all submission guidelines. If a reviewer cannot see your assets, or you need special tools to examine them, or you're missing a deadline, you're likely not either going to be reviewed at all or be harshly evaluated. So that should be a given, but it was noticed that some students did not actually fully review the guidelines, nor did they then submit what they should have when they should have. So we don't know why you created any. Okay, so I'm reading something here, so make sure I get this right. Yeah, if they don't know your if you created something that it's out of context for what you're trying to create, the reviewers are going to be confused. So you're going to want to make sure that you review what you submit and make sure it fits. You can also follow up individually with mentors after you are done with a project. So, or after they're done with this review session. So if you have additional items that you feel you're confused about, you can follow up additionally with the judges and with the mentors afterwards. The easiest thing to do would be to contact the main email on the site and go from there. Also, there are specific tools that you can use that to your advantage. So for example, one specific tool that is helpful for a lot of students is askbuzz.com. So if you're not necessarily familiar with throughput, something like that, you can use a tool like AskBuzz and be able to get some basic information that might be helpful to you. So that's some of the feedback that I've received previously from the judges. Any of the judges, do you have any additional feedback that you want to provide? If not, we'll move right into the.
I have just a little few notes to add. I think when you explain a concept, it's very important that a person that totally doesn't know what you have in your mind will understand your concept. So grab a friend, grab your parents, sisters, a person that doesn't have any clue of what you've done, of what's your thoughts, and try to explain to them what is that you want to communicate. That is very important, because I find sometimes that there were this sort of preconception on what characters were, or maybe what the school assignment was, some previous briefings that we could understand from the page, but it wasn't explained enough. And something that also is recurrent is make sure that everything you put in your page on your presentation adds something to the concept you want to explain, because otherwise, if you explain every time just in a slightly different way the same concept, your presentation is going to be repetitive, and then it gets less interesting for the reader. So those are just few comments of multiple presentations.
And so just to let you know that, these comments, take these to heart now because they're probably not going to be repeated later on. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And here we go. And I have got a timer on screen. Hopefully everyone can see my screen all right. And I'm going to kick off the session. We have 10 minutes, and this first project is called the Horai. So is anybody from the Horai here?
Hi, hi everyone. Yes, we are here. Christian, me, Anna, and Ryan.
Great,
Hi.
awesome. All right, so judges, if you would mind kicking this off.
Okay, I guess I'll start if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Ian. You got it.
I thought it was a great presentation. One of the challenges that I had in reading through this, and some of the general comments that were made before, is not understanding your background and where your strengths or your weaknesses were. But when you're looking at a resort property, there's a significant amount of investment that needs to be made. And when you're looking at hotels and hotel properties, they look at it in terms of keys, and keys generate cash. And I didn't see kind of some basic concepts of funding sources other than franchising. I thought, maybe vacation rentals could be a part of that too, but it was kind of light on the business aspect of it. I thought some of the ideas of the changing of the seasons was fun also, but I didn't understand why Florida was the first location that you would choose in that specific location versus Miami Beach or something like that. Those are just a couple of notes that I had straight out of the gate.
Louis, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for the submission, Flavia and team. I would reinforce what Ian said. I think that there are a number of elements. It's a powerful presentation. You focused on certain elements, certainly more than others. And it was an interesting question. Like your model work was well done, but in some contexts, I thought there was a bit of sensibility where you got kind of a bit focused in on micro details instead of the big picture. Like there were elements where you did a lot of work on waterfalls, as an example. There was a lot of elements, put in there, but there wasn't necessarily a compelling story in terms of how you were conveying what the purpose of the overall connection between elements was, like your convention center to the entryway to the area where the guests were going to be. I think it was a question of maybe going too quickly to certain details and not thinking about the overall business plan, the overall experience, and the overall narrative of people moving through what that guest experience would be. So what I would say, when you think about those elements and to what Jessica was saying, was I think you need to go through, this project would benefit from articulating the overall message from a conceptual level, not just about the seasons, but what the guest experience is and how that works as a whole. Make sure you get those story points and that strength and that user experience down really powerfully, and then drill into kind of details that build that out. In particular, what was interesting was, I went to Flavia's personal website, and that was really powerful at telling a visual story and a compelling narrative about her as an individual. And I would have liked to have seen some more of kind of taking what you've accomplished even on Flavia's website and carrying this project through at that same level. Now, in fairness to everybody that's on this call and all of your presentations, some of these projects I understand are existing school projects, or they were side projects outside of that. So it's also, I think, to the narrative, important to understand what your application was with this. Did you develop it specifically for the competition, or is this just a project that you had that had other purposes? So I don't want to give you notes that are irrelevant to what your goal was with the project. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, well,
Jessica,
I think the other judges already covered a bit the business plan and location feedback. So I want to concentrate on the concept wise. I think you guys have a very nice background story. So the premises is simple and clear. The hotel has 4 seasons inspired by these personalities of goddesses, which I think is very strong and simple, so very understandable. I think what is missing in what we're looking at now is how this translates into the design and the experiences that you find out. A little part that I found a bit misleading, it was the fact that you were referring to Mucha illustrations, so Art Nouveau, which don't have a Greek background. And despite it could be a nice reference imagery for your presentation, you also put it at the entrance of the design. That I think it's a bit of a misplace for such reference. Speaking of reference, as you're developing a resort, I think it's very important to have reference of materials, styles that reflects the concept of and the background story into your design choices. So when you're going to design a lobby or a single bedroom, instead of be a generic modern hotel resort, which I think it is now, try to find those aspects that reflect your story. So what Greek architectural elements, what Greek decor I could use, since still in a modern setting, but that reflect indeed those goddesses. Just looking through my notes, you talk about these 4 seasons, but how this 4 season works in the resort is are there different areas dedicated plus an area that is connecting all those elements with each other? You were talking about in the room can change overnight, for example, and you have this cute little image of a room that changes colors. I think that operation-wise could be a little bit complicated if you are thinking about changing every night decor pieces in a room, which is just a pillar. So imagine someone that has to have, each room has to have 4 sets of decorations that could be changed each night. So maybe developing areas and that different areas of the resort that reflect the season could be a little bit easier operation-wise. And what I think is very interesting is to create these places as part of these goddesses' personalities. Who are they and how they influence the environment that they decided to, how they influence the environments through their personality, through their actions, through their stories. And the last bit is these seasons, as you have it an example here, includes stories that are not necessarily reflecting into the Greek culture, like Halloween or Christmas. So I think to give a better experience altogether, you should find a seasonal festival that refers indeed to your background story.
All right, thank you. Sorry, Jessica. That's it. Okay, thank you very much. We've got about 2 minutes left. Any questions, students, for the judges?
Yes, we have. Well, first, thank you so much for all your feedback. It was really, really helpful. I have a question about, I think this is something that is related to the feedback, because I feel that like resorts is a huge project and we had like 10 weeks to develop. So I imagine that you like sometimes have like the same issue. You have like to work in a large project, but then you have like few time to develop and present the idea. Like what are the strategies? Like, so we should focus more like on the overall concept, like the guest experience. How is it? Like what are the tools or like advice that you could share with us?
Well, I would say there's never enough time, and schedules are getting tighter and tighter and budgets less and less to turn information around. you have to make sure you hit the important elements. Like you guys spent a lot of time building models, which might have been better spent fleshing out how the concept relates to the overall experience. What you need to do is you need to make sure you hit the big idea, you articulate what the value proposition is, what the guest experience is. It's important to have a plan, you know, and that in terms of, I mean, both a phasing plan and architectural plan, and we're talking about a resort. You want to make sure that you create, maybe it's great to have a model, but you want to have a couple of key views that you can do that. You don't necessarily have to have a fly through it, the initial pitch deck. And I think it's important that you show the business acumen of the project, because you want to show how much it would hypothetically cost, how you would fund it, and what its revenue model is, because investors and owners want to get excited about the emotional idea, but they also need to understand the financial part of it to buy into advancing the moving project forward.
If I may add something, one to advise is reduce scope. So make sure you have everything you need to tell your story, and be aware of who you're talking to. So if you're talking to business guys, that means you're gonna want to see more, you know, Excel sheet and timetables and floor plan. And if you're talking to a creative person, so you're selling the concept, then make sure you sell the concept.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, moving along. Like I said, sorry to be quick on it, but I want to make sure we give enough time for everybody. The next group is the Corvus Cruiser Culinary Experience from University of Florida. Do we have any students there here from the Corvus Cruiser?
Yes, I am. I'm the only one here for my team.
Oh, okay, excellent. All right, Jessica, would you want to kick us off for this one?
Yes. So we're talking about steampunk and aliens, which I think is a very nice combo, of course. So if I read through my notes, I think, guys, as your strength point, you have nice aesthetic and a theme combination, which is very nice, and nice renders. And now we're talking, so I think that's your strength. Then on a little bit the weak side, we have a little bit the depth of the concept and some of the deliverables that are a little bit weaker than the others. So in this pitch, you can see there are different art styles mixed to renders. So your deliverables are a bit confusing. In concept-wise, as I said, I think steampunk and the restaurant combo is a very nice one. But I think the execution of the design could have been a little bit deeper than just gears. We're talking about this amazing spaceship and you have a nice character. So make sure that you have those elements reflected in your design. So is this a repurposed spaceship? So where I can see that, like, are those, I don't know, the rooms, like an old deck, for example, that has been repurposed by this robot, or like, I don't know, another parts of the ship, like a warehouse or a storage room that could be repurposed. Just reflect that, because now I think it looks just a bit of a generic restaurant place. I think you can add a little bit more thing to make it more interesting. Operation-wise, I think you have 3 different nice experiences, but I had some questions about how they work, especially in the one with the big machine. You had a nice video explaining how it works, but what happened, for example, to the food that has been burned? Like, how is that disposed? And so you put a lot of burden on waitress instead of facilitate them, which I think operation-wise on a restaurant should be the first. So the first goal, like how to facilitate people to get their food, and also for who is behind the scene, how to get rid of you know, the wasted food, and to make sure that the food gets delivered as easy as possible. Yep.
Ian.
Like the concept, similar to what Jessica has already said. It seemed like it was a pretty expansive place. And it seemed like from entering to the time you dine, there was a lot of time that could be wasted before you actually get to sit down and eat. It also seemed like with the abundance of space, again, you're missing some potential financial opportunities to generate cash flow. And like Jessica was saying, it's all about operations and trying to get a, dollar per square foot or some other metrics in there that show that it's a sustainable model. Most restaurants don't make it, so what's unique about yours, aside from the concept, and does this concept of alien and steampunk, does it have longevity that it's great and it's cool today, but how's it going to sustain itself, past year or two? The aspects of food kind of interchanging and the operational side of that seemed a little complicated. And maybe there's some ways to streamline that process that give you the illusion that those things are happening without them happening. And usually that's the best way to kind of approach some of those things is to refine those things down.
All right, Lewis.
I thought, the concept was intriguing. I thought your team, excuse me, the model renderings were technically well done. Your plan views and the media content were well done. I thought it was interesting how you approached your thought about activating and varying a dining experience. And your facility planning seemed to be well thought out, but the budget to support the initiative wasn't on quite the same level as that. And I would recommend that you evolve both simultaneously, so that budget influencing can influence what you're wanting to do creatively, so that your design intent can be followed through upon. You don't want to have a situation where you've gone too far down the road with one element and then you find out budgetarily it's not supportable, so you have to cut so much or it really impacts what you're doing. Architecturally, I did not feel like the concept was working on the way the narrative or the imagery was being communicated. I felt like it was a significant retrofit to an office building. I didn't necessarily feel as though I was in a crashed spaceship or how that was being articulated from a story point of view. The images did not necessarily elicit the interior of that crashed, spaceship and hand-built steam-driven concept. There was a lot of piping or whatnot. I think it would be cool for you to check out two existing projects. Like the Volcania restaurant at Tokyo Disneyland is a great example of articulating this steampunk concept in a really interesting restaurant environment. And another one recently is Rookburg at Phantasialand, which does a really interesting job of blending those stylistically. I did feel like the number of touch points, even though you want to create an interactive experience, there were very few human touch points that you had. A lot of this was kind of people touching a machine or interfacing through that. And I think service industries, particularly restaurants, rely a lot on human interaction and the human experience. So I think that's somewhat challenging to execute in the way you've articulated that. And as Jessica mentioned and Ian mentioned, I think there are some issues with kind of time to get to food, or how you're going to interact with food that's being thrown away in the concept. There's a lot of time in the way this is expressed at the moment, from entrance to the moment you actually get something to eat. And then I think that will be difficult for people going to a restaurant to kind of engage with that. And then I think that you've articulated kind of each level of the experience. Each of these different floors has a different delivery system. And while conceptually very intriguing, it's difficult from a cost perspective, and likely also difficult from a capacity perspective in terms of, operationally on the business model, how you would support the infrastructure for all those different experiences, and then B, kind of maintenance, uptime, and the business model for the turnaround with the restaurant. But enjoyable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, judges. Benjamin, since you're the sole group member, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but thank you very much for the feedback.
You're welcome.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the next project. This is Sorcerer's Keep. Is there anyone here from Sorcerer's Keep?
Yes, it is myself and David.
Excellent. So, all right. So I'm gonna mix it up. Ian, would you like to kick off this project?
Can I get 5 minutes?
Yes, absolutely.
Come in at the tail end. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Lewis, you want to go? We'll go to you.
Sure. I thought that it was an interesting story. You had developed, a concept in here from a story depth and development standpoint. You had focused some interest on creating characters and related story arcs to the characters. There was some interesting possibility for repeat visitation. I thought there were extended possibilities for plot lines and interactives, in terms of extending that engagement. What I thought was counterintuitive to that in some ways is the project presentation went quickly into story and character minutia. And I felt as though that the average owner or executive is not going to get into that level of detail. Now, and again, it depends on your context to what Jessica said. Who are you pitching to in terms of the concept? If you're pitching to a creative director, they're going to be excited in some of those elements. But I think from a story perspective, you're going to give a greater sense of how the experience works and then give the backstory of the characters and the elements overall. And from a story perspective, I felt it was a bit too derivative of other existing story plot lines and IP that are in existence. So you'd want to differentiate more how your narrative is substantial from other plot lines and stories so that it felt like it stood alone or it had key elements that were significant differentiators from other intellectual property assets and content that are already in the market that you would be competing with.
Can I go?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
No problem. So we're talking about Magic School, which is like awesome. I'm going to read through my notes and saying that the concept felt nice and rich and deeply thought, almost like a book, which could be a pro or a con, according to who you're talking to. So there are different schools on how to make a ride concept, someone says like story is everything, and someone says the environment is the lead. I like to be a little bit in between in using the story that I have to create the environment that I'm in. So you don't have to necessarily explain all the little details that you have thought about it, but you should have them reflected in the environment. That's a bit also for other people. Another note is that the schools of magic I thought were very interesting, but too many. Unlikely you're gonna have like 7 minutes, 10 minutes if you're a very, very long dark ride. Most of the time is like around 5, and have 10 different schools of magic explained. I think it's a bit too much. You need to really focus and a bit reduce the scope in order to go deeper in the level of your design. Another thing that I think could be interesting is immerse your guests into the story instead of give them a little bit of a spectator role. In the end, we have 2 moments that I think there's a lack of immersion is when you find out there's an evil lady, which is supposed not to follow that school, of course, and a bit the end. It's like, I'm coming into this magic school, but I'm not doing magic, I'm just learning about it, but I have not the feel to do it, which is the most fun part of being in such an experience. Also, I think that this evil school was a bit not playing enough role. Like, you're telling me how it's important for me not to follow that school, but I don't see the effects on the environment or on the story or the plot, the problems that these can cause on my experience. So I know it could be a little bit tropey, but I think you should put this lady to disrupt something in your ride in order to understand that you should not do it, what she does. Also, the 2 points on the presentation. It's a little bit difficult to understand what ride system is, because in the 3D model, the spaces are so big, which is a bit not realistic in terms of how you make rooms. Usually they're very small and details are concentrated, so you can spend better your budget. And the vehicle design, I wasn't sure if you guys made it or not, or was a reference picture. So make sure when you present reference picture to say that our reference picture, or if you have a board of different picture, that is easier to understand for us. That is like an inspiration collage. But if you have just single pictures, we might assume that it's yours. So if it's not, please specify it.
Thank you, Jessica. Ian, do you have any commentary?
Just a couple of points added on to what has previously been said. Lots of stuff going on, lots of great stuff, but it seemed like it could use a little bit simplification and focusing really in the continuity related to that. It's interesting, Jessica, that you brought up the ride system itself, because that was one of the things I was looking at, and then going back through the throughput and how do you get guests carried through there, and how does that all make sense, telling those stories and having those options, but you have very limited time to be able to sell that all the way through. I did think that, I think Lewis was saying, it does have unique potential for repeat. And then I also thought that it could be something that could be tied into an app or something else outside of it, that you can continue the journey either after you've done the ride or prior to joining and doing the experience. You can have your own experience outside the attraction.
All right, thank you, Lewis, and the rest of the judges. Any questions from the students?
So if we were presenting this more on the business side, what elements would we need to incorporate into the presentation?
You definitely, sorry, Jessica, throughput capacity, and targeted audience, what age category would also be essential. You'd need some sort of investment. And are you looking at a ride system, show systems that are innovative, or are they an omni mover type that you could buy from vendor X, Y, or Z? So your investment level is going to be, it's a new system that's never been done before, which is going to be a ton amount of money. And for a dark system, it's probably not a wise investment, but trying to highlight and articulate those strategies. You don't have to design and develop everything. You can buy a system, theme it out that it gives unique character as it makes sense, or you can set up your scenes that trick that you never see kind of what's under the stage or behind you, that you don't need to do any customization, aka investment into making it special.
I want to add just a little things, like, of course, capacity is the first thing. You really understand how many people can pass through, and also have a better understanding of the space that this thing is going to occupy on a park surface, and the budget, of course.
All right, any other questions or feedback?
And I would add, again, it all depends on the application. But if you're working with an owner with an existing portfolio asset mix, you want to identify what's different or unique about this experience, or if you do additional research, how this might be a different portfolio asset from regional or international competitors, depending on what kind of park that is. What will set this apart for the marketing group, the creative group, and the financial group is important, because those choices are made. Some may have towers, some may have dark rides, and what it is. And understanding the regional or national competitive landscape helps you to position the product in their portfolio overall as well.
Thank you to the judges. So before we move on to the next project, I want to make sure we introduce MK Haley. MK's just joined the call, and MK is a professor and is actually a judge. And so, MK, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, like you said, I'm a professor and a reviewer. I was at Imagineering for about 27 years, worked with Ian and a bunch of these other folks. I'm right now in Terminal F at San Francisco Airport, so weird things may happen back there.
All right, thanks. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the next project. Escape the Greisin. I may say that wrong. Is anybody there? Is anyone from any students from this project on the call?
So it's myself and Alexa.
Hi.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and get started. And actually, we'll start with Ian. Can I start with you on this one? Ooh, Ian may have dropped off the call. Okay. MK, do you want to go?
So this one was a little confusing for me. It felt derivative of some common, Hansel and Gretel type things, but it didn't really define any of the characters well. I mean, I had to Google the word Grecian, which just simply means old woman, and I'm like, wait, why do we hate the old lady? So there wasn't a lot of there. It seemed sort of like a high level pitch without a whole lot of details. I really appreciated the writing, the use of language to portray the experience was very well done. The ride path being laid out was really well done. But it wasn't clear what skill set the team was hoping to put in front of us for feedback on. And in the section where the folks did list what they contributed, it looked identical. So it wasn't clear, were there other team members that maybe they wanted to join that had skill sets that weren't included, or how specifically did their contribution contribute or differentiate from other folks' contributions?
Lewis.
Reiterating some of the points that MK's made, I felt like the project synopsis did a good job of communicating the value proposition of what was being delivered in the design package. How you articulated, essentially, this is a plot line of an escape attraction, where you're in danger and you're escaping. I thought that the ride plan, as shown in the plan view that exists so far, is reasonable, but it seems too short, in terms of what you might have to wait on, what kind of length of experience that is. And I also thought that it's not fully resolved, because you don't understand where the track reattaches or what's happening at the end. Is this a shuttle system? Is this a system going through a loop into another type of load station? How is that being articulated? And to MK's point, I felt as though it was derivative of Hansel and Gretel. There wasn't necessarily a clear differentiator from a story narrative standpoint. I thought that the renderings, the quality of renderings and the depth of show explanation could be enhanced. Your value proposition was strong, but the other material wasn't necessarily presented on the same level of narrative and articulation. I felt as though in some ways, you're rushing through, the space to escape, and then having to stand in line to get on the ride, contradicted from the emotional standpoint, what that kind of fight or flight experience would be. So you've got this moment where you're in the queue or you're in the space, and there's this theatrical experience, but then you've got to wait from that to get on the ride, would be disjointed, and the emotional connection in the story would get lost through that. So you have to find a way to join what you're doing story show wise with what the ride experience is. I did the Mummy a long time ago at Universal, with the team there. And it was one of the reasons we kind of pushed everything onto the ride vehicle when those story beats happened, because you wanted to make sure you could keep the guests moving and you weren't having a dead spot within that story. Or when you look at a use of multiple ride systems, your experiences like, Rise of the Resistance does, but they've structured the story around the use of each system and those story beats to kind of work through those gaps, and where there's action and not action would be something else to think about, and how you articulate the story or evolve this attraction. And I felt as though, there are some operational issues from an ADA compliance, standpoint. Climbing a ladder is difficult. You're going to exclude a lot of people from participating in that. And this may not be allowed in many theme parks in the United States. You could definitely do that in Europe, where there's a much greater latitude with what you can do physically. And I thought that the project overall lacked the depth of documentation that some of the other project submissions had included, and again, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know if this is a project you did for school or another application. So I don't want to speak out of turn. I'm just using that as a comparative amongst the other things that I reviewed. But thank you very much for your submission.
And Ian, do you have any comments? I saw, Alexa, your virtual hand go up, but yeah, we'll give you an opportunity to ask a question. But I want to make sure I give time for you.
I think many of the points have already been stated, but the few that stuck out to me was exactly what Lewis is saying, that is the continuity. And I was kind of confused of when I was transitioning from walking through to a ride system, and how do you continue that and not lose that continuity of story and not lose that momentum, as Lewis had mentioned, related to the system. And an ADA. It's funny. It almost looked like we had the same notes. Lewis is saying, okay, if there's stairs, then you're singling out a potentially significant portion of your guests. And is there another experience that they can have as an option that do not include the stairs, or can you rethink that where you don't have to have those physical barriers to allow more participants? And as you're walking through any sort of attraction or experience, again, how do you crowd control that, and keep that momentum in your story beats if there isn't something physically ushering you through, like a ride system itself?
All right, so we do have a few minutes for questions. I know, Alexa, your hand went up at one time. Any questions for the judges?
So I apologize if this was unclear in our deck. There is no walkthrough portion. It's all being done in the ride vehicle, up the stairs, and then the reverse down the stairs is all in a ride vehicle.
Understood.
Cool. That wasn't clear. I didn't understand that before. Did Jessica get to comment, or did we lose Jessica?
I have just.
Oh, my apologies.
No
Sorry,
problem.
Jessica.
No problem. I have a few things to add. I think you guys had all the ingredients in your presentation to make us understand what you want to do, but the order was a bit confusing. As I said before, like, you have to make easy for the reader to understand at which part of the experience you are at every moment. So please bring the reader through the experience. In this case, you have a very nice presentation of everything that happens at the start, but then we have no visualization of that. And that visualization comes just later. So I would suggest you to break down that first explanation of the experience in all the different beats that you explain later. I really appreciate the reference images. They're one of the few groups who actually had those reference. And concept-wise, you are talking about a futuristic a futuristic city, and sort of old-fashioned cabin into the votes. But these two locations, as you presented now, feels very disconnected, as in the visualization that you offer doesn't really make me feel that I'm in the same space, in the same world. So something could be a little bit older, but you have to add elements of that remind each other of this connection between these worlds. So for example, you could have made the lady, I don't know, maybe a robot, or include in the house little elements of this futuristic world that you have seen before. No, that's it.
All right, thank you, Jessica. Any other questions from the students?
Not at this time, but thank you so much for the feedback and for giving us students this opportunity in this space.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next group. This project is Domo. Is there any students from Domo that are on the call?
Yes, we are here. Me again, and Lena and Enya.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start the clock. And Jessica, would you be willing to kick us off?
Sure. I don't have a lot of feedback on this one because it's a little bit out of my sort of sphere. But I thought you had a very nice presentation. So very good graphic design. And so those are the sort of the strength and the sort of the concept. So you're introducing, I think you want to fix a very interesting problem, and I'm not sure how if that is the right way, if the end is just ordering food. In part of your concept, you have these part of the VR experience that you share with others, which is make dumplings, for example. And then at the end of your experience, you're going to get real dumplings. In my experience, food classes, especially, are something very manual, that you have to feel in real life. So my question is that experience actual real life, or is just VR? Because otherwise you get the risk to have this sort of cooking mama experience that I'm not sure is what you want to share the culture, because then it will look like a little bit more like a video lesson on how to make food instead of an actual shared experience.
MK.
Sorry, muted. I loved this one, and this is one that I shared with a whole bunch of other people. The parts here that we saw were done really well. There are gaps, for example, there's no particular story, but I appreciated that these students introduced who they were and what they did. They used tools that backfilled skill sets they didn't have. So I'm not asking these, like this little animation we're looking at is from a fairly automated process, but none of them are animation students. And I'm fine with that. Delegate as need be, but make sure that we understand what your skill set is and what you're asking us to look at. The fact that the high level concept was research driven, X% of international students suffer academic negative due to homesickness. Like, yep, there's your problem statement. Here's some solutions. I'm super on board with Jessica. The mobile version seemed fairly rich, the VR version, and then like the physical version was dumplings. That was lame. So you want to up your game there, but this was presented well. It had a beginning, middle, and end. I would suggest getting those other skill sets, story-wise, a little bit more data to inform this, to round it out. But for the bits that we did see, they were very complete. 1 sec, I have a bunch of notes for you here. An incredibly thorough and well-considered and presented marketplace that sells personal connections and international touch points, less story-based and physically immersive than our industry might lean towards. Any further exploration of how a tool like this might be more inclusive to guests with mobility, sensory sensitive, economic or geographic limitations would flesh it out as a tool with way more potential. Feels highly scalable.
Thanks, MK. Ian.
Yes, sir. Agreeing with the comments, probably one of my favorites also, just in terms of scalability. Pretty thorough in the application, and you could see a bunch of different ways you could go with this, and you talk about some of those in the deck that you guys provided. But I guess, and maybe I'm the money guy in some of these things. How do you make money out of it, right? So subscription base, is it, ad sales or whatever? I would have liked to see a little bit more development related to that, but I definitely think, you know, one or multiples of these things could actually really take off into something unique.
Thank you, Ian. And Lewis.
All right, well, I thought this was one of the more impressive presentations. You know, I thought in particular that, you know, I'm an advisor on a pet app, actually. So from my standpoint, looking at this, you know, I think that of many of the projects submitted, this one is actually one of the two most commercially viable submissions I reviewed. I mean, I think you guys potentially have an interesting business model that you could scale and create revenue. Like, this is a business opportunity for you guys if you pursue it. The content fills a void in the market, which makes it very marketable and an investable concept. Your content and the value proposition seems strong and compelling. Your user interface seems to be intuitive and pretty well thought out, because you've been able to articulate that and take us through on that journey. I know everyone is kind of, you know, focused at the moment on the fact that they feel like the physical doesn't necessarily follow through in totality, but I would say, you know, the metaverse is a very hot topic at the moment, and it's excellent to be at the edge of that, offering an innovative portal to that world to participate in that way. Many brands are looking for this opportunity to exist in the metaverse space, and I think it's very timely for you to kind of capitalize on that as an opportunity. The project, as everyone has mentioned, you know, has a great ability to be scaled. You know, you could deliver this, and I can connect you with the guys that we're working with the pet app, and you can talk to them, and there might even be some other opportunities, and we have some VC people who might be interested. I would say one of the challenges is that the project, while very nicely presented and aesthetically beautiful, lacks specificity. You know, there's some specific information that's kind of broadly articulated. I think you need to kind of go back in and create some detail around that. You've created a presentation video, but there's, you know, from 1 minute and 10 seconds to about 2 minutes and 16 seconds, you've got a whole section of the video that's not really delivering a lot of content or value in that. You could use that from a story perspective to drive the narrative and the story in a much stronger way. You're losing storytelling time that can be more effectively used, you know, for your consumer audience. The China section is really strong at effectively communicating what is happening compared to other, you know, narrative points in the video. Some of your slides repeat for no discernible reason. And I think, as Jessica pointed out before, everything that you add, you know, or put in the presentation should add and build on that. Don't put anything in that's kind of filler and isn't creating value in that way. And I would say, you know, if this were a pitch deck, and I think MK is approaching it from an educational standpoint, and I think it answers it from that perspective, but from an investor, deliver it in the commercial marketplace standpoint, if this were a real pitch deck, which this project I think could translate to being a real pitch deck, you've really got to isolate for them and identify for them what market problem you're solving. I mean, I think you're in a void in the marketplace with this content, but you've got to help the people who would invest in it understand what that missing element is that you're filling in. Great presentation. Thank you very much.
All right, I think that's all the judges. Flavia or any other students, any questions for the judges?
Well, first, thank you so much for the feedback. I think it was great because we work like with a diverse team, so we could like combine different skills. But I have a question, because I feel that we are creating a project that is not totally like conventional for the themed entertainment industry, but at the same time, we are trying to target like a market that it's not so familiar with the entertainment industry. So what will be like the advice to try to talk to both, like show an audience that is not totally in the entertainment industry, and even like talking to the themed entertainment industry, presenting something that is different?
Well, I mean, you know, our company, we do that a lot. So, I mean, you know, we've kind of moved away. I mean, even though it's still a core competency of our company, you know, we've moved away from focusing on theme parks. We still use our skill set in other markets. So we work in military simulation. As I mentioned, I'm an advisor on an app. We're working on art installations around the world, and, you know, cruise ships and other atmospheres. You have to learn the vernacular of each of those markets that you're going to enter. You know, language is a gatekeeper, and you're bilingual. So you are already crossing the threshold, speaking a native language and learning English and understanding how to communicate in that. You've got to understand, as Jessica pointed out, who your audience is in each of those sectors that you're going to enter. You've got to learn what the language they're looking for. In the military, it's optimization or it's efficiency. In the museum sector, it's about legacy and what your value and contribution is to the community. In brands and many ways theme parks, it's guest experience and profitability. Understanding which market you're speaking to and how to craft a presentation around that market so that they receive your message and your content in an effective way is very important. You know, you can still use your core competencies and your skill sets in all of those markets, but you've got to learn how to sell your product and your idea in each of those markets in their language and their demographic.
All right. Thank you, judges. Good question. All right, next group, Daudalus, the Lost Wings from University of Texas at Austin. Any students here from this group?
Yes, myself, Sarah, and Olivia are part of this group.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start the timer, and let's start off with Ian. Do you want to kick us off on this one?
Sure. One of the things I really liked about this is you actually built it. You tested it, you had a budget, you stuck to the budget, and you actually delivered on something. What I'd like to have seen is maybe a little bit more insight to what were the plans for rolling this out in a different scale. You know, are you looking at pop-ups? You're looking at integrating into other LBE type stuff, and kind of what was the plan related to that? I think the technology was simple, and it was cleverly used, where, you know, you can have somebody that, you know, once you guys have figured it out, somebody that, you know, no offense to Slurpee operators, but a Slurpee machine person can operate this thing effectively. And when you look at implementing something like this, you can't always have, you know, your A team of technical experts being able to execute it. You got to really kind of dumb it down so it's repeatable for all guest experiences.
And Lewis.
Well, I really enjoyed this project very much. You know, I think of all the projects, you know, one of the challenges you have is when you guys go the extra mile, it gives people a lot more opportunity to comment on different facets of it. So, I mean, I think this project went further than most of the others did. I thought your pitch deck imagery with photos illustrating the guest experience was very well done. It was excellent at articulating the project's value proposition and what your marketing hook was. The team really put a lot of thought and effort into the project from every possible facet. I thought it was a very impressive effort. I really thought it was an excellent group presentation, much more powerful than any of the other ones I reviewed, about each participant, each discipline being represented in the presentation. I felt like the entire team, the quality of work was reflected through the group dynamic that was on display in the content. I felt as though this was the most well-balanced interdisciplinary project that we looked at, and it was executed at a very well level. I also believe that it was one of the other two most commercially viable submissions. Like I can connect you guys with some people who are doing rooms of this nature and possibly get you an internship or, a possibility to implement some of your models in that way. Some of the challenges I saw, I thought your wiring diagrams were a bit of a weak link in terms visually, in context of the other assets that you showed. They weren't up to the same level of work. And now it doesn't detract from what you built, but from a presentation standpoint, it wasn't on the same level as the other content. I would say the same with your graphic interface. You know, some of the letter narrative or how you've done that wasn't as strong as your other content. And that's, kind of, in one case in your video, the wording is spelled wrong. In another case, it's spelled right. I'm sure it's a correction you guys made along the way, but it's just something in the polish of your work to kind of think about. We're getting into refinements here. This is a question about pacing and how you sell your concept of your story. And you kind of began the presentation with behind the scenes material. If this was an actual pitch, that would be supporting documentation, not necessarily the lead into what your pitch is. So I think that's that would be seen as bonus material as opposed to being the anchoring material. And that's because attention spans are really short these days. And you only get a few seconds to kind of hook people. So you've really kind of got to get the concept out there, get them excited and want to buy into it, and then thirsty to see more detail and information. And I think really kind of as the penultimate comment is, you know, as a proof of concept, this is a very powerful project. You know, there are a number of durability and capacity questions that would be necessary to answer to execute this project in reality. But as a proof of concept, you guys have done something really outstanding. That's a great model for, you know, other students in your institution or other competitors in this competition to kind of look at as a benchmark for the future. So thank you very much.
Jessica.
Well, I really, really like this concept. It was fun and well thought. So very, very good on that. Like it was just said, I also find a little bit weird the first video that you have. We indeed talking about these behind the scene elements, but once you start your sort of run through that, it goes smoothly and very easy to understand. So that's very nice. I think I really appreciate the little details, and I really love when you use your story and your sort of lore, like the little coin of Iris, so you relate to the background story and the mythology to actually go through your mechanics into this escape room. The only thing I thought a little bit underwhelming was the end. I really love, you know, the fact that you open the second room, that's super interesting. But, you know, the end, I think you miss a little bit the wow moment because you see the wings that are already there. And the end, it gets with little light and that's it. So I thought you have very nice pace every time that you do mechanic. That was very interesting. But then be very careful on your climax points because that makes the sort of end moment wow or not. And it's what probably most people will remember, the satisfaction of solve your escape room. Like sort of the 8th season of Game of Thrones, you know, you sort of forget all the nice parts that has been through the season because the end sort of was terrible. But other than that, very well done, guys. If you wanted to try to, you know, go further, I would suggest you to go and make a little bit more artistic presentation and, you know, lay out all the different elements that will help you to sell to someone else.
Thanks, Jessica. MK.
So these are my students, so sit back and get ready for the totally biased feedback. This is a really interesting example for everyone to look at for what was the purpose of submitting to this, the themed attraction showcase. This is an opportunity to get your work in front of the eyeballs of people who do this for a living, right? Like Ian is up to his eyeballs in wiring diagrams, right? And each one of us comes from a different lens. But if you were presenting this to be funded, you would want to sort of swap the order. What is it? What are the high level art, and then get into the details. And this YouTube video that you have, if you just added some of that to the front, you'd have like nice one-stop shopping. There was 2 bits here. There was the video that showed me what you built, and then there was the written part. So if there's some way that you combine those 2 into one package, I think that will really serve you well. But you know, this was a thing that existed. It ran for several days. It earned X $100. X hundred people went through it. Those are all ridiculously useful data points. I adored the fact that you're like, whoops, messed up on this part. Here's how we fixed it, because we've all been there. So if this were to be pitched to, you know, a children's museum where you wanted to do something similar, how you did it in the materials would be critical to them. If you were pitching it for somebody to fund it or sort of a creative proposal, sort of the ordering might be different. And that's true for every project that all of us do. There's never just one package that works for everyone.
Students, any feedback or any questions for the judges?
We don't have any questions at this time, but thank you so much for reviewing our project.
All right. Moving along. Next group is Mystic Caverns queue design. Any students here from Mystic Caverns?
Yeah, this was me. This was a single submission. It got switched into the wrong category, but yeah, this is just my project.
All right, thanks, Robbie. Well, okay, we'll go ahead and get started. And Lewis, would you be willing to kick us off on this one?
Hold on, let me pull up my notes here. There we go. I think that the sounds like fun. The Q narrative sounds like it could be interesting and very well done. I like the implied use of technology and viewing characters that react to a person's proximity. For instance, like when you have the reflections in the pools. And I think some of that is assumed on our part from the way you've written it up, because it wasn't necessarily actually explained in the presentation. I think there are some narrative touch points that lead us to understand that. I liked the progression of content, effects, and immersion as you made your way toward the load station, with the intent of kind of elevating the overall experience as you went through that. I would have liked to have understood how that progression continued into the actual ride experience itself, or at least at the load station, how we were going to transition from this story and narrative experience onto what the next nature of the experience would be. And I suppose that's a question about the submission and difference from other projects. This is a submission about the queue only, whereas other projects that we reviewed were the whole attraction or the concept kind of presenting the end-to-end experience. So I don't want to say there's a detraction to this, but I would just say I would have liked to have heard more, or at least understood where it was going. It may have been a question of time or your other commitments that didn't allow that to get continued. And I would say, one thing to think about for the future, you've got a lot of kind of handwritten components in this. It's okay if you have kind of sprawling content, but I would say in this case, the quality of illustration and graphics could be enhanced. You spend a lot of time doing some fly-through elements, and your illustrations and the handwriting aren't up to the same level of continuity in your presentation. And I think it would be important just for the value of the presentation and meeting with the audience to ensure that all of the elements are of the same quality level in the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lois. MK, you want to go next?
Yeah, so this was one I was super excited to see from the title, a hyper-focused look at a queue. Everything we need to know about a queue, all the queue business, but then it didn't really deliver on that promise. I didn't see safety rails, I didn't see pathways. This was also one of the ones where Celtic are real people from a real place that have real myth and lore, and this just didn't get it right at all. Parts of it were invented, parts of it were misapplied. The runes, the symbology that was used was literally scratches. That's a real language and it wasn't used. And it's also rife with typos, spelling errors, grammatical errors. So a lot of that pulls me out of what the thing is, because I have to read it. I'm like, wait, what is being said here? Oh, it's the words are swapped or the language is swapped. And this is also one where I wasn't exactly clear what foundational skill set the student had. So Robbie, I Googled you. And then I was more confused, right? Because your website has way better work than this. So this isn't maybe the best representation of your capabilities. I did the focused pitch I loved, right? Because sometimes we see a group of 4 people pitching $1 billion project and they just can't get to the details. With a solo submission submitting a queue that tells a story and preps you for the attraction, that is super doable. That's a really great construct to give yourself. And then I just got sad as I walked through because it wasn't any of those things. But we all have more notes that we will send to Nathan, and Nathan will forward to all the students the complete notes from the judges, but just at a very high level. I was super excited by the potential here and then sad that it didn't land it.
Jessica.
Yes, I of course agree on what has been just said, so I'm going to just add on it. First rule, like the most important thing in theme parks ever is safety. So you want people to go through your ride safe. So make sure you design something that is safe. Now, I know Lumion sometimes it's a bit weird, and in your fly through, we have some parts that it feels very dangerous. You know, there are rocks that you can climb on and you can, you know, fell from. So make sure indeed you had fences and you don't had danger to your guests. I think the lore of and then the background culture is of course very interesting, but not necessarily integrated into the design of the queue line. I have like a little tip. Based on your floor plan, it fell and your fly through, it fell a bit that you don't have the sense of space yet. Everything feels very big, and you basically even don't see the ceiling or what sort of is right next, and not because, you know, it's cleverly designed to have nice views, but because the space is very big. So I suggest you to download floor plans to better understand how space works for these parts. And has this design of the queue line, like I said at the start, make sure you reduce the scope. Is you can present a layout of few rooms and few spaces on a queue line. When you design it, if you don't have the time to pull through the same level of details of all the room, choose one or two when you express all the key element of your concept. Concept-wise, I think that the queue line Concept 5 was a bit confusing because we didn't understand if this magic, it's sealed and it's good, it's bad, are we saving it? What's the role that guests will have? That is something that of course will be developed in the ride, but the function of a queue line is to prepare guests of what they're going to do in the ride. So you have to set up, if, for example, you know, the magic is bad and it's leaked out from these gates, then show in the queue line what the consequences of this leak has been. Put story elements that prepare the guests to have all the information that they're going to need in the ride to better understand the ride, which is a very short time. I thought it was nice the idea of interaction with the guests, with the MOOPs, a little presentation part. If MOOPs is a new word, we don't understand, it's the lore sort of that you add into the attraction. So make sure to explain who they are, like classic MOOPs, this creature. We don't know, and maybe we have to Google it or not, and that's not what you want for your ride. I thought it was nice, but be aware that the function of a queue line is to get people through and make the waiting interesting. So if people have to stop, you have an operation problem that will create a bottleneck, and you don't want that in a queue line because that is a problem if people cannot flow nicely. And yes, one little stress again. Make sure you don't misspell the title of the ride. That's, you know, no matter what you're gonna do next, if it's a very nice concept, but if you make that error in the first bit, then people will not want to see the rest. That's it.
All right, thank you, Jessica. Robbie, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have one for just portfolio sake going forward. As I'm fleshing out my portfolio and I later go in a different class to do a ride design, would it be better to do the ride for this and so I have like a full project that's fully fleshed out, or would it be more helpful to do a ride in a different style that I haven't done before to show kind of like the that I can do a variety of themes and styles?
Go ahead, Lewis.
Well, I mean, I think every application is going to be different, Robbie. So I employ a lot of different people with different skill sets, around the world. First and most important, I would say is, and I think this points to Jessica's point also, it's better to have less that's really good than try to build a lot of stuff that's kind of not at a quality level. So, if you took this queue line, for instance, and took it further and refined it in detail where you can show an architectural plan, your story, how you've developed it in detail, and it'd be a super powerful piece where you had 12 pieces of content related to this queue line, that's more powerful than trying to show 12 different things that might be out there. And it depends, again, on, do you want to be a 3D designer? Do you want to be a master planner? Do you want to be an attraction concept or a producer? Each of those also has kind of a different application to what you're pursuing. And I would add one other note. You're getting opinion from everyone and these are opinions. If you're developing a queue line, for example, like Flight of Passage that Joe Rohde did, that still has, that's non-narrative. That's a completely visual cue. And he decided to change the context of things that are in the film, in the queue, in that attraction. Historically, like MK's right, if you're going to riff off doing specific runes and content from that culture, yes, it should be appropriate to that. But if you're creating your own hypothetical intellectual property separate of that, you have latitude to kind of deviate from that if you want to. Or in the case of, if you're in Europe, you don't necessarily follow the same rules where you have to have queues and ADA compliance like you do in the US. So I think you need to learn the fundamentals of what's working in the industry. But once you learn the fundamentals, you can kind of break the rules, and based on where you're at geographically in the world, change those rules too. So that take everything and I'd say this is true to everybody on these calls. Take everything you get with a grain of salt. Learn what you can, but there's no final set of rules everywhere. You can break the rules and do things in a unique way and represent what you're doing in a different way. And each owner, each country in the world you have or work in will have variations on those concepts as well.
All right.
If I can add one
Yeah,
last thing.
if you could, Jessica, real quick.
Yeah, watch what other people did before. Watch how people develop queue lines, space-wise. The feeling for space is one of the biggest, I think, skills that you can have if you want to be an attraction designer, because you are designing spaces. So download floor plan, go on Google Maps and measure stuff. You have to understand how things are big and how things work.
All right. Next group, Beetle Mailcenter. Is there any students here from Beetle Mailcenter?
Yes, just me, myself.
Okay.
By the way, I have a question. Do you think I can record this just for my teammates?
You should be able to do you may be able to do a local record, but this actually is being recorded, and
okay, so
I believe
it'll be on
that it's
YouTube, I suppose.
I'm guessing it will be added to the website at
Okay,
some point.
cool. I'll tell them that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. All right. Kicking us off. Let's see, Jessica, do you want to kick us off first, and then we'll go to Ian, and then Lewis, and then MK.
Well, guys, I think this is a very, very cute ride. So my suggestion is keep developing it. You have a nice core idea. It's cute. It's not seen a lot around. So push this so you can have a nice portfolio piece. So as I read through my notes, it's a very fun ride, very cute. The team is not seen very often. I think to put this in a, to go next level, I think you need a little bit of calculations to be made for your queue line, have it a little bit more realistically made. You can push a little bit further the design. So consider that you need way, way more space if you want to have like a 1 hour or 1 hour and a half queue line. You have a nice image for the start as a concept art. Just, just think about the big trees are always a bit difficult to realize. So you might want to rethink about your entrance. A little bit more on the technical part of the side, make sure that your 3D model is okay and you don't have overlapping faces, because then you'll have a little bit, this flickering effect. And the ride system is, I didn't understand really how you can pull it off. It's a roller coaster, it's a dark ride. So I think a little bit an addition on a technical explanation on what kind of system this is, that will help in selling your concept. But in general, I think it's very, very nice. Well, and last thing, make sure you have your safety envelope around every piece of the core, because the core piece feels a bit. What? Sorry.
I have that in mind actually. So,
okay, but
okay.
It felt a bit close.
It is. Yes, some part like the columns. I know, like because of the video shooting. Also, like I read. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. That's it.
I think I had Ian as next.
Yes, sir. I would agree. Fun idea, fun concept. The queue seemed a little extensive, and there's probably some optimization on the ride system. I would have liked to see a little bit more technical detail, as Jessica had said. And what I was trying to get my head around and understand are we as the guests shrinking down to the size of the bugs, and then or the beetles, and how does that happen? Or are the beetles now human size, right? So what's that transition from our world to their world? I don't know that I fully understood what that was.
Sorry, I didn't explain it, but actually there's like a really long tunnel in between. So where they give you like 2 minutes to disconnect you from the real world, like a minute or so in the queue line. That was my intention. I just didn't mention it in my design. Yeah.
And that's all I had.
Okay, Lewis.
Sure. And it's great to see you here, Jiawei, because last year you had a great submission. So it's nice to see you back in the competition again this year. I thought it was a very fun creation of an original IP concept, which is enjoyable and wonderful. I really liked all the kinetic movement and multi-layered activity shown and expressed in the visualization, and how you've kind of created these complex movement layers in the environment. It's wonderful to see so many animatronics and physical experiences. There's a reliance on so much media and everything these days. It's great to see these physical components in this environment. Equally though, that also presents a challenge to selling this concept. In today's market, many owners will shy away from the kind of show depth and maintenance that this ride would require to build and operate. So understand that's one of the challenges you might have in delivering this kind of system or pitching this to other owners in the industry. Speaking of that, everyone's mentioned unclear about what the ride system is. Is it a powered coaster, like a mock system? Is it a dark ride vehicle with a motion base? Because your POV and your pre-visualization is leading us to believe that we're either in a spinning coaster or one that's in a controlled vehicle. So the camera choices and selections, are creating some of the issue that Jessica's articulating, where you can't tell where the safety envelope is. And that's a question of understanding, what are you communicating? Are you communicating a POV or a fly-through? How are you using your cameras, and what information are you trying to articulate in your pre-visualization to the owner? Because it's a little confusing. In some cases, it's a POV, and in others, it's creating a fly-through perspective. So how you want to use your cameras and your visualization is important. I felt as though spatially there were some issues about areas being very sparse or very long or far apart, and particularly so toward the end of the ride experience. The last scenes of the ride experience were really distant from each other. There wasn't a lot happening in those. There may be a function of you running out of time building the model or populating those scenes, but it felt very distant compared to earlier scenes, which were really dense and compact and had a lot of thought-provoking, usage of the space. It's unclear at the moment, and you might want to add to this, things like onboard effects, media, audio, we're using lighting effects. How can you communicate that with your story? Like last year in your, the Nutcracker, you had articulated a lot of things and you narrated the story. So I think that's important here. And I think there are some other attractions that would be really inspiring for you to look at when you look at this, like PNP projects. Delivered last year to Liseberg, a project called Underlanten, which has a really great inspiring mix of show sets, lighting, media, and animatronics. I think that would be a great one for you to look at as an articulation of this. And there are other classic dark rides. That's a water ride, but Sinbad is an interesting one at Tokyo Disney Sea, but the scale of that's much larger than this, but it's an interesting one for how it uses those characters and spaces. And there are some, other recent smaller dark rides in regional parks that are building out these concepts that I think would be exciting reference points for you to take a look at and inspire what you're doing creatively. So thank you very much for the submission.
MK.
Like other folks have said, this is just super charming. It's a very cute idea. It's very accessible for a wide range of guests. But it feels like a really great assignment, right? If we gave all the students in here the assignment of it's a bug mailroom, it's a dark ride, and we don't know how it's powered, but figure that out. It's got some funny bug puns, go. Like people could fill that in really well because it's a solid structure, but there are gaps in what is the story? Why am I there? Why is that one lady in the yellow dress? And she's human and I'm a bug. What's going on there? But I do believe that those can be answered. It's not as if those are unsolvable problems because it's a nice solid framework. But it just needs a lot more details on how does it work? What is the script? Is this, and at one point you actually have in the script, this is a very exciting part of the ride. And literally the music's like, do, 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 do. So it's like not at all an exciting part of the ride. So align the verbiage you're using with the images and the actual sensation you think the guests will feel. But I don't think it's not doable. I think it's totally doable. You just need a team of 200.
And I would add, Joey, another ride is Tom and Jerry at Warner Brothers World. That's a coaster that's done at this scale where you're Jerry's scale going through the walls. It's a coaster. It's another good one for you to see a POV of that applies directly to your concept.
Jawei, 50 seconds. Any questions for the judges?
I have some, my group might ask like possibility for improvement, which you guys pretty much talk about, and what we are missing, also talk about. I think I couldn't really think about anything for now. So in order to better sell it as like a portfolio for us to use for job application, what do you think we can use from this development to use as a portfolio piece for our group mates?
Yeah, go,
If
you
want to use this as a portfolio piece,
yes.
Make sure to define what skills you used, what were your responsibility in the project. And then we know it's an industry that it's team-based. So we know that everybody, one single person cannot do all the things in such a limited amount of time. So it's very important to know what you've done and highlight how your skills that could fit in an actual team.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to move on to I believe it is the last project for the day. So apologies that we are running a little bit over. The last project is Triplo Colpo. Any students from that group? Okay, no students seem to be on, but we are recording. So we are going to move forward with with feedback. So, MK, would you be willing to kick us off?
She just jumped on a plane, I believe, Chris.
Oh, she left.
Yeah.
She flew away. All right. So, Lewis, would you be willing to start us? Then we'll go Jessica and then Ian.
Sure, absolutely. I think that this project had a fun and original intellectual property concept. I thought there were some interesting possibilities there. I enjoyed the use of different ride formats for rider heights to give guests the opportunity to interact and select their thrill level. We've participated with some different owners on those kind of levels. For instance, Hershey Park a couple of years ago, it's not our project, but they did like 3 levels of drop tower so that different age groups could choose which attraction they wanted. So I thought that was nice. The heist plot and ensuing chase can be a very fun and effective way of creating high stakes and excitement in an attraction. The multiple ride systems interwoven is equally exciting for riders and guests who are viewing either from the ground at a distance or who's sitting off to the side. The plan view, I think, for the complexity of the system was well done, and the visualization was strong for understanding each of the ride systems and what the relationships were to each other. Mind you now, in the same token, like I spoke about in the last project, many owners in today's market would shy away from the kind of ride and show depth and maintenance this would require. There would have to be a compelling reason for a draw to make this kind of investment in 3 ride systems and an experience to do that. On a personal level, I feel like the warehouse theme is a bit overused and sparse. It's related to many times as a budget solution in a lot of projects. So I would prefer to kind of avoid that. It would be better to use more of Venice or the museum interior, to create gags and creative interaction opportunities. An example is like the back of house areas or museum mix areas of Mystic Manor is fantastic at articulating these different environments in a space. I'm not entirely sure the way that the show and ride systems are laid out and articulated and the no limit simulation. And it may be a question of the speed, but it looks fairly accurate, that the story can be effectively told in the way the systems are moving through these spatially. I think you want some early scenes that might represent that, or a compelling story payoff at the end of the attraction. And the way this is oriented at the moment spatially and speed-wise, it may be hard to carry that through. This attraction, as it's explained and as it's shown, is going to require a very large show building, which along with the multiple ride systems may make it cost prohibitive both to build and then to air condition and operate overall. So spatially, that's something to think about from a volumetric standpoint. And I would say, for the effort put into the modeling and the planning, the illustrations could really use some enhancement to match the level of planning and visualization, how you want to sell the concept. Your vehicle renderings, aren't as strong as the other content that's put together. And then I would say, creating this kind of integrated dark ride with multiple ride systems and show sets and environments, it would also be valuable to help articulate, are there any onboard effects? What kind of media, audio, lighting, and whatnot that you're using to help convey the story and narrative that you've created. So thanks for all your hard work. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lewis. Jessica, you want to go?
So I really like this concept. I think the biggest strength is that you want to integrate multiple elements in a land, and I think story-wise is a strong concept. The presentation, I really like the presentation because, like explained before, it really brings you point by point, so it really guides you through the experience, and it uses reference images with because it's I think very helpful when the art is not there to convey that feeling. In terms of concept wise, I think it's really intriguing to have this heist. One fun note, I'm Italian, and the sort of mob family, it's called Puffini, which in Italian Puffy means Smurfs. So I thought that was very cute. One thing that I think could be problematic in this case is the queue line. So most of the time people don't like to be in queue line. I don't understand, I love queue lines. But here you have, as you laid it down now, you have one queue line for 3 rides. So it's going to be most likely that people like one more than the other, and the experience. So you're going to have 3 people, the different people in one queue line. So the times will be 3 times added to it, which is something that really people don't like it. So make sure to design a queue line that make a difference between the 3 rides. So once you're waiting, the experience is also different. Maybe you could have indeed joint moments, like the moments of the heist, like when the museum is robbed from multiple points of view. I think this is a bit the key, like seeing a scene from different perspectives. And I think you should put that perspective indeed in your queue line. So maybe instead of just have 3 different ways to escape a heist, you can introduce the police point of view, you know? So it could be nice that maybe you have, or could be nice that you know, you get someone call the police office about these potential heists. You see all the preparation of the police, they can chase them. I think that could be a nice way to explore. So maybe differentiate a little bit the narrative, so you have at the same time one big overlay theme, which is the heist, developed 3 different ways. And then those 3 different ways has some joint moments that I think will make it a even stronger concept.
Thanks, Jessica. Ian.
Interesting concept. Like Lewis had said, I do agree with the idea of being able to grab a larger audience, you know, relative to height, and be able to experience kind of this thrilling adventure. It is a significant amount of investment, not only from a cost standpoint, but land, not only for the ride system, but all the back of house stuff that really wasn't well represented. So you have cars and trains that have to come on and off of these tracks. That's going to be an outbuilding that's super significant. That will take another chunk of land away. You know, I didn't see anything related to ADA on some of the previous other discussions that we had also. And, you know, I think Jessica had mentioned too, that there's probably going to be some queue problematic issues that, you know, there's going to be one that will be the favorite, and you'll have 2 ride systems that aren't getting the full utilization. So if there's a way to, you know, address that, or come up with solutions that maybe are 3 separate entry points, that it doesn't back up your whole system, and then the whole system is ineffective. So things to think about, but looks like a fun ride.
I would add one other thing. Technically, the industry as of recent has kind of moved away from creating a lot of near miss experiences. You know, there have been other rides that were built that way with this intent that have been decommissioned now. It's kind of a legal issue, and nets and safety and whatnot. So, you know, it's something that's exciting visually, but there seems to be less of an interest now from an owner perspective to deliver that kind of thrilling near miss moment. Or in your rendering, you might want to show a lot of nets that would differentiate, you know, or separate those, so that somebody's shoe or phone couldn't come off and potentially injure someone else from a safety perspective.
A great point.
All right. Well, thank you to Lewis, and thank you to each of the judges. That is all of the projects. And so I know we spent some significant time here. Just a couple of notes that the judges' notes will be going out to all the students. The final results, and this is pretty much done science fair or county fair style, where we're going to have a couple of different categories for best of and awards. Those results should be posted hopefully by this evening. We're still waiting for a few things to come in, and that will be posted to the website as well. And like we said, if you want to reach out to mentors, please feel free to contact us through the website, and we'll do our best to have someone get in touch with you for additional questions. So thank you again to the judges for taking your valued time and working with our students. And students, thanks for participating. Please do so again next year.
Congratulations, guys.
Well done.
So,
Thank
Thank
you,
you all very much.
everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.